My friends, I'd like to share with you a little story that comes from the countryside. Once upon a time, there was a chicken and a pig, and they were walking along having a nice conversation. And they happened to walk by the church. And there was a sign there at the church that said, "Come this Sunday for a breakfast fundraiser." And the chicken reads that sign and says to that pig, "We should help them out over here at this church. That fundraiser, that's a worthy cause. After all, you're a pig and I'm a chicken, and we could provide ham and eggs for the breakfast fundraiser." And the pig says to the chicken, "Well, that's easy for you to say. For you, that's just a little offering, but for me, that's a real sacrifice." Well, in today's gospel, Jesus points out the difference between two different kinds of contributions in the temple treasury in Jerusalem. First of all, on the one hand, there are the rich who put in large sums, but what they give is simply from their surplus wealth. So it's not really a hardship for them at all to give large sums of money to the temple. But on the other hand, there's this poor widow. She contributes all she has to live on, her whole livelihood. She gives not out of her surplus, but out of her substance. Her generosity means that from that point forward, she's going to have to rely on God, even to provide her very next meal. Because, in their culture, in first century Palestine, there was no social security safety net for widows. There was no retirement plan. Widows did not have inheritance rights. There was no pension fund for her to draw upon. So after she gives those 2 small copper coins into the treasury box of the temple, she has nothing else left. It's a radical act of generosity, an abandonment to God's divine providence. And she trusts that God is going to have to be her safety net from that point forward. She's embracing a voluntary sacrifice for God. And what does Jesus do? He praises her for that. She's very much like another widow who was almost 900 years before that, at the time of the prophet Elijah, in today's first reading from the first book of Kings. When Elijah met this widow of Zarephath, he asks her for a glass of water and for a little bit of bread. But all she had on hand was a tiny bit of flour and oil, and she knew that after that was gone, she had nothing else to survive on. And when she chose to give the last of her food to the prophet Elijah, she put her total trust in God's providence. She made a radically generous act of self-sacrifice. And what did God do? He took care of her, and He did not allow that widow to starve. So both of these admirable women from today's readings have a lesson to teach us about sacrificial giving. Both of them are actually pointing the way to the generous self-gift of Jesus Christ in His sacrifice on the cross. Our second reading in the Mass today talks about that. From Hebrews chapter 9, where it says that Jesus Christ sacrificed His own life, paying the ransom for us, taking away our sins. That's a total sacrifice. So after hearing these readings, you and I need to pray about them. And I recommend that you pray about these readings as you personally participate in this video Mass today. We all need to prayerfully discern and ask ourselves, what am I going to give? All that we have and all that we are gifts from God. Jesus Christ gave His life for us. So what are we going to give back to God in appreciation? Are we going to simply give back to God some comfortable little offering? The leftovers of our life? The table scraps? Our spare change for the Lord? Or are we going to give to the Lord the main course, our whole life? In Luke 9:23, Jesus says, if you want to come after me, deny yourself, take up your cross daily, and follow me. So what will that entail for you and me? Let me throw out a few examples. For some of you, following Jesus with that kind of sacrificial self-gift will mean giving your whole life to Jesus by living a truly holy sacramental marriage, where you give your whole life to Christ by your self-gift to your spouse in a lifelong commitment of daily sacrifice in a marriage that is faithful, permanent, loving, and open to the gift of new life through children. For some, it will mean giving your whole life to Jesus by entering a religious order as a sister or a brother or a monk or a nun in a lifelong commitment of daily sacrifice of poverty, chastity, and obedience. For some of you, it will mean giving your whole life to Jesus in the priesthood or the diaconate, serving God through His people every day. For some, it will mean giving of your time and your talent and your treasure in sacrificial giving and generous stewardship of the church. For some, it will mean getting involved personally in feeding the hungry, educating the underprivileged, and helping the poor find a way out of poverty. So no matter what is our own particular vocation in life, every one of us is faced with that same fundamental question: what am I going to give back to God?